Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Welcome to another episode of Not So Average. I'm Alistair Shipley. Before we dive in, please take a moment to subscribe, share the podcast, help us get this out there. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a true powerhouse in innovation and entrepreneurship, Ray DePaul. As the executive director of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Mount Royal University, Ray has been shaping the future of countless students for over 13 years. With an incredible background that includes pivotal roles at RIM during the early days of BlackBerry and a successful exit as a founder selling his own company to Intel, Ray's expertise is second to none. He also serves on the boards of multiple companies, further extending his impact on Alberta's tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem. Personally, Ray has been instrumental in helping me land several jobs outside of university, and his knack for talking people off of ledges is legendary. Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, man.
I appreciate you.
It's about time. It's about time.
It's about time.
You had to ask Rudy to ask me whether I would do it. So,
did he actually ask you?
yes.
Oh man, that's awesome. I got powerful.
So
friends.
you need to get a little bolder.
No.
You could have asked me ages ago.
The funny part was, Rudy was mentioning that you were going out to his neck of the woods, and I just dropped that little nugget. I was like, you should ask him if he wants to be on the podcast. And then I didn't know if he was going to, because Rudy is classically buried in his own things. And I was like, I'll reach out. You didn't tell me that he actually asked you first. That's hilarious.
I told him to tell Alistair to ask me. It's not high school, man.
It's the direct indirect. That's what I like to do.
Yeah.
So I just like diving in, but Ray, you've obviously had an incredible journey from being a key part of early days at RIM with BlackBerry to selling your own company to Intel, right?
Yep.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your career that fundamentally shaped your approach to entrepreneurship?
Wow. So I think I'm a reluctant entrepreneur. Like, I never entered my mind that I wanted to do what I do for that period. So I was a joiner. My entire career, I just joined companies.
Yeah.
And one pivotal point was when I realized I couldn't compete with the coders. Like, I have a great degree in computer science, was all proud of it, but I just looked around me and went, holy crap, these people are willing to work 20 hours a day and not eat chips and just not have any interaction. So that was I got to do something different. And so that's when I decided I'd get an MBA, because that cures everything. Which I only recommend MBAs to people who have non-business degrees.
Oh, seriously? Okay.
Yeah, it's an expensive way to learn the same stuff and build a network. The network's valuable, but there's other ways to build a network.
Yeah.
So unless you're going into finance, or there's some things that MBAs are really special for, but it was designed for people like me, right? Engineer, computer science, how do we give them that skill? And I just realized, oh man, I can actually talk two languages, right? I can talk to developers, and I can't code as good as them, but I can talk to them. And then I was decent at talking to customers and the business side of the house. So that changed my trajectory. And then went into like product management,
Okay.
which was, at the time, it felt new. I think it was like that. I'm old, in case people can't tell. So
Celebrated a birthday recently.
I did, a big one. But yeah, it was that not the original wave of tech, but one of the original waves. And we were just trying to figure out, how do we not have engineers be responsible for entire companies exclusively?
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough to jump in at that time. And so I look back, and again, I'm old. But I got the first companies I was at were basically helping build the internet.
Okay. For the .com.
So yeah, before .com, I remember I was a young software manager and we had a networking product, and I had a co-op student who came to me and said, we just learned about this thing in class called TCP/IP, which is the protocols for the internet. And he says, I think we should change and just use TCP/IP. And so I brought him over to our 45-year-old chief architect, and he said, I read all about that thing. We can do better than that. And it was literally my decision. And I was like, I'm going to go with the 45-year-old. And so we decided we would compete with the internet. And so my next job was better because that didn't work out. But it was just an amazing time to just get your feet wet and start learning things. And it was, a crazy time. And the whole RIM thing is just luck. Just being, they were a bit of no one cared about them. They were a contract manufacturing company. Contract engineering firms. So companies would pay them $200 an hour to design hardware, software, whatever it was. And they were doing that for a decade before BlackBerry ever was mentioned. And then they just realized, oh, wow, we're getting really smart on this thing that was known as wireless data at the time. And there was this debate internally about what we should do. And there's a lot of people that said we should charge $250 an hour because we're good at this.
25% increase.
And I give credit to Jim Balsley, who was the CEO, co-CEO, but he just said, why don't we build something? And so that was the beginning of what we knew as BlackBerry. So I got to join right then, because then they said, oh, we need product people. And I lucked out. They wanted engineers, but they knew they needed business people. So an engineer with an MBA was the two criteria. So I put my hand up and said, I got one of those. and joined and kind of rode that rocket ship.
How did you even find that job then? Because this wasn't...
Waterloo is a small place. So this is in Waterloo, Ontario. It's people know it now because of places like RIM and other companies. But small group of people. In fact, the company where I decided we'd compete with the internet, as they were going under, we basically set up a job fair trying to place our people.
That's loyalty.
Well, it's people. Absolutely, right? You're going to let them go, so let's try to set them up. So I actually set 3 of my direct reports up to go to RIM, which was a small company at the time, now known as BlackBerry, in case you didn't know, Research in Motion. And I actually interviewed with them, and they said, we don't need any managers. So I went someplace else, and then the next one I found my way back to RIM. And so that 3-year diversion probably cost me $10 million. So just for what the stock and all that kind of stuff.
It depends on how long you held for.
Oh yeah, could have cost me $100 million. Is probably the better term, or nothing, But I just think you got I've in some ways I've had a straight line career. I remember saying when I didn't even know what this meant, I wanted to be the president of a software company. I didn't even know what that meant. I grew up in a household where you didn't talk about careers, you talked about jobs. Like no one went to school before my generation. And we just knew doctors, lawyers, accountants, and I was good at math. And I had a grade 11 guidance counselor who was an alcoholic. So they put him in guidance. He was a teacher. We can't have alcoholic teachers. But an alcoholic guidance counselor is okay. So he told me, I said, I think I want to be an engineer. And he said, you didn't take grade 10 drafting, so that's going to be a problem. So I said, well, what can I do? And to give him credit, he said, there's this new thing called computers. Like literally, it was new enough that I don't think our school had one. And I just said, okay, let's do that then. So there's just these weird little serendipity things that happen. And probably the biggest serendipity moment that happened is in second year university, my high school girlfriend at the time and I had a little surprise. His name was Christopher, and that is a focusing event. Yeah. And I can imagine it going the other way for some, and I was lucky that, first of all, my wife said, okay, I'm going to slow down school because you're not. And it just made me, everybody was like feeling bad for me, and my best friend said, that's really too bad, Ray. I had such high hopes for you.
Oh, it's so nice.
That was, well, I'll show you. Yeah. So I think that that provided a level of focus that I had it at the time, but more, yeah, I'll show you attitude.
You honed in.
And never missed a step. My wife slowed down her degree. My wife stayed at home for a few years. Not me. Like, I studied in the labor room for an exam the next day because it didn't even occur to me that maybe I could get an extension. Maybe that's a comment on this generation students. It takes nothing to get an extension these days, and I had a baby while studying for a calculus exam.
Oh, man. I'm just picturing my grandfather, because he would have been the generation that would have been teaching yours, and he was a university professor, and he probably would have been one of those ones that would have been a hard convince to be like, are you really at the
exactly
hospital? Like,
exactly
prove it.
Yeah. What time was the baby born? That still gave you a few hours. Yeah. And that was, again, it forced us to make a few decisions. Like, I started looking for jobs in co-op jobs. So Waterloo, I went to the University of Waterloo, and it's got an amazing co-op program.
Yeah.
That changed my life. I still think a lot of what happens inside a classroom is a commodity these days. We're all teaching the same stuff. Maybe you can get an amazing prof who can have a huge difference. But on average, it's very similar. So just because I went to Waterloo Computer Science, you'd think, oh man, that meant you learned the best stuff. And it's the same stuff. What was different is every other 4 months I was in industry. Yeah. I was working in companies and learning a whole bunch of other stuff. I wasn't just applying. I was learning a whole bunch of new stuff that I had to learn. So that's what set us up, staying local to Waterloo. And I just embedded myself in the Waterloo. We didn't call it an ecosystem at the time.
It's a nice buzzword. Works.
It is. It's funny how we have this desire to label.
Yeah.
It's by definition, an ecosystem isn't supposed to be controlled. We like to put a lot of labels and controls on it just to make sure no one else puts labels and controls on it.
Well, there's somebody running around there saying that they coined ecosystem too.
Sure.
It's a claim to fame.
Yeah.
But do you know what I find interesting with all of this? So just proving that tech is so fast paced, BlackBerry and RIM resonates a lot with my group of friends, the millennials. But there's now a lot of your students have no idea. And so what resonated for me, and probably why I clung to your classroom, was I think it was your very first class that you taught.
I was.
You were given the syllabus. And I tell everybody this. You were given the syllabus, and the classroom wasn't listening. And there was this little tidbit that you said, I've already had my success in selling my business. I've worked for some of the biggest companies like BlackBerry. You can listen to me or you can not. And I was just like, I was like, that was the first time a teacher's actually spoken that candidly. I was like, I'm interested. Like, I was committed. But that BlackBerry line that committed me to your classroom and then later to getting the minor in your program may not have resonated if I was this year's class.
It doesn't. But it's interesting because I had a teacher come in, a full-time prof who you know, and she had to sit in the back of my class and give me feedback because they just want to make sure I can teach. And the basic message is you can't teach. And the reason is I didn't care about the students who didn't want to be there. And apparently it was my job to care about them. And I'm like, I just don't want to work harder than they're working. So I used to, I think, do a really good job with the 10 that cared and the 20 that paid to be there. Yeah. I didn't really attempt to try to draw them out. And so I actually stopped doing those formal 1 to 30 student teaching. Okay. And I haven't done that in a long time. Yeah. I much prefer intimate groups, coaching, mentoring, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, let's just say I had a sexier resume a decade ago. It's not as... Although I do, when I bump into older people, man, I can still drop the mic pretty good.
You're the talk of the party for
Exactly.
sure.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of excitement and buzz around selling to companies and stuff like that. I am curious what your experience was like when you sold. So that was RapidMind.
Yep.
What was that experience like for you? A lot of people have glamorized that experience. Some people have had an exceptional time when they sold. Some, it was forced upon them. So what was that kind of experience for you? Was it filled with excitement, relief?
Yeah, I think if I loved it, I'd probably have done it again, but I went and joined a university. So that tells you something. It wasn't, so I can finally describe what the company did and now people understand it. So we were one of the pioneers in GPU computing. And literally until ChatGPT came out, no one knew. I couldn't describe what we had built and why you should care. And it's, the thing AI is completely built on top of, and the reason NVIDIA is a multi-trillion-dollar company. We were early, and we were always looking for what is going to need the kind of horsepower that GPUs can provide.
What was always at that point in time?
Financial engineering, we had customers in that, lots of high-end like Adobe and Autodesk kind of graphics, and some real weird like climate Scientology, that's not right. Climate Scientology, climate science. But yeah, very niche-y.
Okay.
And it turns out we basically competed with NVIDIA's software. So NVIDIA's who they are now because they built a software stack on top of their chips that would let anybody use their chips for compute as opposed to graphics.
Yeah.
So we had built the same thing that would support NVIDIA or AMD or Intel, whoever had GPUs. So we were the open strategy, and open always wins, right? It didn't this time. So we weren't forced to sell. We just knew that it was either going to be an Intel, an NVIDIA, or AMD was the other one. It would be one of these would be our acquirers.
Yeah.
So when Intel approached us, it was like, we either have to do it now, or we know we probably have to keep pushing for a couple more years.
Yeah.
And one of our investors said, Ray, if you want to keep going at it, I'll stand behind you. And I said, with more money? He went, well, I didn't say that.
Whoa.
Yeah, really stressful, really stressful.
Yeah.
And
was it the granularity that they combed over you guys? Was it just never a sure thing? Like, what made it so stressful?
So now I know, like they were, I think, trying to keep us off balance.
Okay.
And there was always one more thing.
It was tactical.
And in hindsight, I was falling for it because I'd already told my wife, you know what, this is going to happen. Why don't you start planning the big trip that we always wanted to do? So mentally, I was already gone. You're already planning, because I knew early in the conversations, they basically said, we don't keep this CEO because we want them to follow us, not you. So there isn't a place for you, Ray, in this. And that was fine by me. Yeah. They wanted all the engineers.
Yeah.
And so, again, looking back, I probably didn't have the walk away guts. So again, I should do it again because I've learned so much. But it was a pleasant process. They, when they did come up to try to finalize it all, it became clear that this was going to happen, which was great. But it was only like a 5-year run, and I found that exhausting. So I look at some other companies, and and it was one of my
plans are just butchered.
So there's a guy in town, Evan Hugh, who I'm sure, and I respect him a lot, and he always said people talk about running out of time and money, and he goes, personal energy is the one that kills you all the time. And that's, I think, I didn't run out of money. Clearly didn't run out of time. Like, we were still early. Could I have raised more money? Probably, because it was pretty sexy at the time. But I just ran out of personal energy. So I only had 5 years worth of personal energy. I don't know how these people do it for 10, 15. But a really good experience. Like every experience, it's all about the people, good and bad. So we had our share of shocks in our system. I had a right-hand person who was my right-hand person at RIM. Yeah. And I'd say once a month, one of us would go into the other person's office, close the door, and announce the title to the next chapter in the book. And it was things like, what do you mean we don't own our intellectual property? So it was great to have a person that you could do that with, because we were just like, holy crap. One of the last things they did before signing off was, I don't even know if it exists anymore, but they used this software called Black Duck. And what it does is it just scours your source looking for open source. Mm-hmm. So what they're looking for is, did you just steal this stuff? Yeah. And it was almost like a dollar value per time that they averaged out as $100,000 for every time that you used open source that you weren't licensed to use. You're just hoping this isn't 1,000 times. And you don't have control over your Like we didn't have the controls in. We were at that point, we're just like, holy crap. Like what if one guy, all they did was like search the internet and download other people's source and put it in our source. So that was the final heart attack. We had some of it and they just said, yeah, no problem, and finalized it. Oh, wow. And then I think I was on a plane to Italy within weeks. Like it was that quickly. So
was that where you stayed until 2012 when you started Mount Royal? Because there was
no. I did. So 2009 we sold. No, we just did a 4-month stint in Rome, and very privileged to have been able to do that. But I now tell anyone that if you're going to have a gap, whether it's thrust on you or not, so it's thrust on me. Yeah. I was burnt out and we were financially stable, which is good. But it's like, how do you enjoy the gap, right? Like, how do you not stress out so much that the gap is lost time? And full credit to my wife. She just said, let's have that trip that everybody talks about having when they retire. But then shit hits the fan and somebody gets sick, marriages break down, whatever it is. So we had that trip and it was amazing. Then came back and just consulted, mentored, avoided trying to start something.
Yeah.
And it was my wife who said, I think I was mentoring the Pebble guy. Your generation knows my Pebble stories as well. This generation doesn't care about that.
Tech that was the biggest Kickstarter up until that point in time.
That's right. Basically the guy who invented smartwatches, and his success is why Apple brought it out. And Apple's watch is why
it is what it is.
And his Pebble went under. He's bringing it back. He's actually starting it's not a Kickstarter, but he's starting
going basic.
Yeah, exactly.
There's this movement of going back to basic. Like you still want a level of notifications, but not to the same extent as what we're seeing right now with everything.
And he's just tapping into some nostalgia. But anyway, my wife just said, I used to mentor him, and my wife said, you seem to have a great day when you meet with Eric or this other guy I was mentoring at the time, Mike. And she said, is that a job? And the coincidence of that was hilarious because that day, the guy with my job in Waterloo forwarded me this job posting for a job in a university I'd never heard of at a city I didn't want to live in.
I think it only just became a university.
I think so. And I didn't know it as a college either.
Clown college, yeah.
And so that was, again, the serendipity. I had taught at an MBA class. It's really my only intersection with but just one of those profs, sessional instructors, whatever we call them, who come in and just invite their friends to speak in a class. That was me, right? There was no thought into it. And we just thought, let's try this out. And we have a granddaughter in Toronto that isn't bringing us back. So we just, we love, both of us love this move, love the city, love the area. So
you must have interviewed pretty well for somebody that had only just occasionally jumped into a classroom. And then you indicated that somebody evaluated your teaching abilities recently.
Yeah.
So how did you sell Mount Royal on taking a risk on you?
Yeah, it's funny. You quickly, I've given this kind of advice to others, is you end up knowing what bucket you're in.
Okay.
So I expected that I'm going to be competing with PhDs. So there'll be this bucket of researchers, PhD people, and then there'll just be this bucket of recovering entrepreneurs, we'll call it. Know what ocean you're in, and don't worry about the other one. So if they're going to pick up PhD, you're out anyway. I think I won because I was shiny and from another city and that BlackBerry thing. I've met people who applied since, and I'm like, what? How did I beat you? And I just think I was shiny, and it was funny. Like it's odd to say, but the stuff we were talking about 13 years ago is so common knowledge now.
Yeah.
It was so easy, and maybe I think I just had some good common sense, but it was so easy to stand out just by having a different view of what entrepreneurship could be. And it was just the beginning of this notion of entrepreneurial mindsets and entrepreneurial thinking, and whereas most people would start talking about startups. And I instinctively knew it wasn't going to be about startups at Mount Royal. It was going to be about these experiences, and I think that resonated with a bunch of academics. And Pat Lohr.
Oh.
So I'll shorten this story because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I was interviewed by this classic committee, which I've now been part of, and they're awful. So it's 8 people in a room, all with one question, no dynamic, no get to know ya. And it was just awful. It was just this worst thing ever. And mentally, I'm going like, I wouldn't even want this. Like, why would I want to work with these people?
Let me unsell you on why I should
Exactly.
take this job.
And somebody fell asleep in my interview. Somebody cried in my interview. It was just the weirdest experience I'd ever had in a professional environment. And Pat Laurer was, who's somewhat iconic in the city, was the community member of the committee. So he literally walked up to me at the end of the interview and just said, Ray, do you want to grab coffee in the morning? My wife and I were going to drive to Banff, but we decided we'd stick around one more night. And in that coffee, he basically said, I don't know what the hell that was, but here's what I think you'll be able to do if you join. And so I owe Pat my job because that night, my wife and I decided, that this is too risky to leave my kids were adults at the time, but they were still felt like kids, and they'd stay in Toronto, and we'd sell our dream house, and we would just shift our life after that. So we took a huge risk, I still think. Selling the house was a biggie, right? You got your dream house. It was the kind my wife said, they'll carry me out in a pine box, that kind of a house. Yeah. But we just knew the first year was going to be tough, right? I'd never worked for a university. She would know nobody when she got here. And we knew that the first year was tough. And if we had an easy out, we would have taken it. And we probably would have. So we burned the boats, as the myth says. Spaniards. And pushed through that first year. And then all of a sudden, we both got our feet under us. And 13 years later.
One thing that you did seemingly, well, from the outside looking in, it seemed this way. You did a remarkable job at building your network in such a short period of time, only rivaled by Neeraj Gupta. But,
yes, Neeraj.
But how did you manage to do that?
So that was the scariest. So I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
And I don't like going to events. Waterloo had something called Communitech, which would be like Platform Calgary here. I never went to any of them. Just didn't like it. And when I came here, I just decided I gotta say yes to everything. And it was tough. Like, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that's one of my proudest achievements, was willingness just to put myself out there. And thankful my wife joined something called the Newcomers Club, which is for new people coming into the city. So she found friends that way. So it took, because I was at least 3 nights a week, if not more. And I said yes to, I got asked to be on the Startup Calgary board, if you remember that. Yeah. So I just kept saying yes, and it pushed me way outside my comfort zone. And even the public speaking that came with that was way outside my comfort zone.
That's a crazy thing that you mentioned, that you're an introvert, and I only know that because you've told me that. But once again, if somebody was to observe you when you speak, you're very well-spoken, and when you're in a group of people that you're comfortable with, you also seem to be having a good time. But to hear that where you're at now versus probably where you started is probably night and day.
Each semester I speak at a course we have called The Art of the Pitch, and it's all about communication and pitching and I think it's just a public speaking course. Yeah. And I always tell them that I have a Bachelor of Mathematics in Computer Science. Never had to speak. Like, literally, you don't have to speak in that. And you get a degree. And then I did an MBA, and my deal with every team was, I'll do all the work. Just don't make me present. And even, I mentioned we had a little surprise. So my wife and we have a hastily arranged wedding. We were a very Catholic family, not Catholic enough, obviously, but Catholic. And I wasn't worried about the fact that I was going to have a baby. I wasn't worried about I was going to get married. I wasn't worried financially. I was worried that I had to do a speech at my wedding. And so it was debilitating. And I was almost done my MBA. I had one more elective to take, and I took the equivalent of The Art of the Pitch. I got to challenge this. And the very first thing was do 3 minutes on something you feel you're an expert at, which is good, right? So you're probably better at this than anyone in the class. I did it on making an ice rink. That's silly. And at the end of it, and I used to cut the grass practicing it out loud because no one could hear you and over-prepared for this thing. So I do it, and I feel like I've nailed it. Yeah. And so the prof asked, the class any feedback, and people had some odd feedback, which is fine. And then he just said, so what do you think about raise hands? I'm doing this, right? So I'm Italian, and half a dozen hands shoot up from the students, and they're like, I find them distracting. You should maybe put them in his pockets, or maybe put them behind his... Yeah. And so the prof said, I thought they were spectacular.
Yeah.
And it was just this gift of be yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be the perfect public speaker. I'm not going to be Tony Robbins and all those guys, just so I have my own way of speaking. And I'm sure there are people who might be watching it going, why has he got his hands gripped like this on the table? It's because I want to do this.
Yeah.
So that was a huge, it's funny, you were asked earlier, and I didn't identify this moment, but all of a sudden now I felt like I could speak. And it's not like, it's very unnatural. Like in a week, we're going to have our big Launchpad pitch competition, and there'll be 300 people there. That is not natural. You do not get up in front of hundreds of people to pitch your business. You do it in small environments, usually boardrooms. Yeah. We've turned it into entertainment, like the whole industry has. But even, I don't know what the magic number is, but more than 5, there's some number that where all of a sudden it feels like you're presenting as opposed to talking. And that was debilitating for me. So getting past that opened me up for that product management I never did sales in the true sense. When you're CEO, you're obviously the chief salesperson, but just knowing that I could do it. I was one of 4, I think, or 5 at RIM that were allowed to speak publicly because we had a whole bunch of engineers that didn't know when to shut up. They would all of a sudden, because we're a public company, and you get an engineer in front of a microphone who just decides to say, "Oh, and you know what we're working on?" And man, yeah. So I eventually just got better and better at it to the point where I'm more comfortable. But I've got a speech I got to do at Launchpad in a week, and I'll be nervous. And I got my son's wedding the week after that, and I'll be nervous at that. And I'm probably going to give the wrong speech at each of them, and the entire wedding will start to become an entrepreneur.
You got to keep the hand gesture going, because there's a podcast I listened to with Vanessa Van Edwards, and she was talking about the art of effortless confidence and self-persuasion. And she had studied the most popular TED Talks in TED Talks history. Yep. And they found a correlation between the most popular and the least popular, because obviously if you're in a TED Talk, you're the top of your class and you're generally well spoken. But the key indication that she found that made TED Talk really enticing was the hand gestures. It was documented about 480 hand gestures, and I think it's a 15 or 18 minute period.
Wow. Was
the average for the highest viewed videos versus about 240 for the lowest viewed. So it's this kind of, people follow the body. We learned in door-to-door sales, it was referred to as metaverbal. But basically, the body language really made a difference. Yeah. So your excitement in your hands matched with your tonality gets people really enticed with you, versus your tonality but your hands are by your side, or your hands are doing something but your voice isn't matching. So I think you've learned that skill. I'm dying to know this because you have shared this in the past. Do you believe entrepreneurship is teachable, or is there special characteristics that make somebody really stand out as an entrepreneur that they're born with, perhaps?
Yeah, so my soundbite is we don't know how to create the next Gretzky or McDavid or name your favorite Flames guy, because I can't. But we do know how to create the 1,000 NHL players that make a living at it. So I think if you take out even I look at our Launchpad program, I can't control the anomalies. And we know some of those anomalies, right? Yeah. That has so little to do with us. But I would say over the years, the average has increased. And that's because we have got better at moving people along and teaching it.
You're also attracting those people that have that interest versus, I didn't even know it was a program until I signed up. I probably couldn't even get into your program now.
We take everyone. It's actually scary. Our toughest thing is recruitment. And I don't know if it's the parental everything says that Alberta is an entrepreneurial city or a province, and Calgary is an entrepreneurial city. But we went through a period of such immense prosperity by, I don't want to just say by just showing up, but by just showing up.
Yeah.
So my fear is that there's a generation of parents who have instilled a safety message in their kids, which is why like accounting and finance are our two biggest programs in business. And I think the reality is there is no safe path.
Yeah.
Like the one reason I love what's going on in AI is it's just shaking everybody up. It was fine when robotics was taking the blue collar jobs, but what do you mean? Now they're coming after our white collar jobs? Like,
And I thought it was
now
safe
it's
as being
serious.
creative. I thought it was
Yes.
safe being creative.
Oh, so I just think that should shake everybody up to the point where
Put in effort.
put in some effort. Exactly. And I'm a fan of a generalist. I know you have to, your first job probably comes from being a specialist, but I think the more broader you can think, but you're right, even like creativity, darn creative, those
Yeah.
agents. And it's really interesting. I'm thrilled I'm at the tail end of my career, not
Yeah.
the beginning of my career, but I would just be, if I'm 20 right now, I'm embracing the heck out of this stuff.
Yep.
I'm not worried about, I was at an event and a very high up person at another university that was on a panel, and the topic was AI. And their go-to response was, plagiarism is a serious problem.
Oh, goodness.
And like completely lost the audience, right? And it was like all they could see was this as a threat to their status quo. And I just think the opportunities are amazing. I listened to a podcast on the way in this morning, one of my favorite podcasts, Lenny's.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, it's amazing.
What's it called?
Lenny's.
Lenny's.
Lenny, apostrophe S. I don't, Rawachowski or something. He
Okay.
just goes by his first name.
We'll find it.
And he started it as a podcast for product managers. It's expanded beyond that. But it was this company called Lovable. I think it's called Lovable. And fastest growing startup in ages, I'll just say that. I think they were, with the first month, they had $2 million in ARR, and they're growing $1 million in
What?
ARR a week.
What?
And all it is a text to app. So it would let somebody, the person who understands what they want to build it without the requirement for the engineering talent.
The coding. Yeah.
And I'm sure there are problems with it, but it's just this freedom of, it's more important to know. Like we run a whole program now on trying to get technical people to understand what they should build, as opposed to, I just want to build. Because the I just want to build part is becoming automated.
Yeah. It's commoditized.
And there'll always be, I have a son who works at Wealthsimple, which worries about things at scale that aren't allowed. Anytime you deal with money and fintech, not allowed to fail. That's where you need real computer science. But there's a lot of us out there, I think, who have ideas. And I can't tell you how many people have said, do you know any developers that might want to join my company? And the answer is no. They're just like, they're tough to find, and they're tough to find that are willing to take the risk. And I think eventually the pressure will be on these AI agents to make that, to get you to 0 to 1 without the need for a big development team.
Yeah.
Go from 1 to 10, you might need one. But so I just find this is what I'd be thirsty at if I was at the beginning of my career, is how can I be, I've been fortunate enough, I got to be part of the internet wave, then I got to be part of the mobile wave. I actually left RIM to join something that could have been Netflix, but it wasn't. So that would have been like the streaming wave.
Yeah.
And these don't come around that often. And we're seeing one now. So I think that's the opportunity for anyone who's serious about having a really interesting career, is let's not ignore a wave. This is a generational wave, in my opinion.
So do you see that AI trend as just a global trend, or do you also see within Calgary or Alberta or the Canadian tech scene any other trends that maybe aren't AI related that the community should be excited about? Because everything right now seems to have a lens of AI attached to it, and that's what's getting all the attention.
Yeah. So I'm more interested in, so I remember when the internet was, everybody who understood the underpinnings of the internet were out there telling the world about, like I said, TCP/IP and all these things. And we had a false one with blockchain. Everybody was,
that was quick
promoting
in and out.
And I think those of us who had seen it before were saying, like, this isn't the same as the internet. This isn't that foundational. But I think where places like Edmonton's an amazing foundational AI place. But just like the internet, yes, you got the, what the heck is Andreessen's Netscape.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the original internet companies went amazing and made wealth for a bunch of people. All the other wealth was created applying it to problems in the industry you were in.
Yeah.
So I think that's our opportunity. So we're effectively an industrial city, like we do B2B. And I think knowing that, okay, we're the closest people to this set of customers, how do we use these tools to make their experience better, to make us more efficient? So I think that isn't about being highly technical.
Yeah.
It's just about understanding your customer and understanding like what the capabilities of AI are. Yeah. You don't have to actually understand AI.
I love this conversation because this is my whole job right now, is my technical abilities.
Such as they are.
And I've hired 2 exceptionally brilliant AI professionals to work for me. One of them, he does listen to this, shout out to you, Robert, is going to Japan to talk about AI and its capabilities at a conference. He works out of Athabasca University here and has come and joined our team. But it's these individuals that have allowed for my vision of how to improve the customer service at a solar company that's across Canada wide. And we're making huge waves. And they've taught me it's not so much that you have to have an understanding of how the AI necessarily works on the back end, but you have to know how to prompt it, how to ask the right questions. And when you understand that, then you can basically do whatever.
Yep.
And these guys, the other person that I hired, Paul, is exceptional as a product manager, and he builds everything with AI, and he doesn't know how to code. And it's incredible what they've done together. So
yeah, I think, first of all, it's just going to get easier. Like right
Yeah.
now, prompt engineering seems to be the thing. That's just going to be another layer.
Yeah.
I think that'll disappear as being the piece of power. Just don't be a laggard.
Yeah.
That's I think you don't have to be the first.
Yeah.
But if you just look at that technology adoption curve, you want to be early enough in it that
Yeah.
all you're trying to do is be better than your competition.
Yeah.
And that'll be your edge. And then once that flywheel keeps going, you'll get way ahead of them.
So there's the lens of looking at it as competitors as in like other companies, but now you have the individual contributors or the employees that are also looking at what is their competition. And we have to navigate that quite a bit at this solar company, that we are automating and using AI for a lot of this stuff in the hopes that we, yes, don't have to increase our overhead and employee count, but to keep the people that we have if they're willing to learn the processes. And unfortunately, it's really sad to see so many people putting on the brakes and saying, no, I can't do this. No, I can't do this. And we've created it with the lens of that it's simple for everybody to use. And they're now just the managers of the systems that we built out versus having to do the mundane work. But they're scared. They're not happy about it. They're putting up the roadblocks. And that's been an interesting thing for us to navigate. And I hope that people do hear this from you and just don't be a laggard. Also take an effort and extend yourself to learn about it. And yeah.
You did just in the news in the last week, right? The Bay.
Yeah.
Like this is the kind of thing that causes these massive disruptions and leaves companies, a 400 plus old company.
Second oldest company in the world.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And this is just creative destruction. But it's these types of moments where all of a sudden entire industries will get created and they'll start, you won't even recognize them when they start, right? But just imagine if your company has the ability to apply these technologies faster than the status quo competitor. Not only do you beat them, you start looking for other problems that customer has, and you start solving those problems. So now you're beating other companies that are also selling to that customer. So I think just getting that's why I just think it's an amazing opportunity right now, and it'll be around for a while. This stuff's going to keep moving really quickly to become that person inside the company that starts pushing this through.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was in front of 1,000 people at the chamber event or something. And I got in trouble for saying this because I basically said, if you think you're an innovator and your company isn't allowing you to innovate, quit and join somebody that will, because we need you to innovate. Like the city at that point was stagnating, and we just stagnating, whatever that word is, stagnating. And we just need the great innovators to be given, you get guardrails. Like I'm not about free reign on everything, but find somebody out there that's willing. Like we look at an alumni like Logan.
Yeah.
So out of the blue, this guy has become an AI speaker globally and expert, and he knew nothing about AI 5 years ago.
Nope.
Or 4 years ago even. I think these are just inspiring how easy it is. I remember years and years ago, I read one book on neuroscience. Yeah. And then I read a stat that said, if you read one book on a topic, you're smarter than 99.9% of the population. And I'm like, holy crap.
And you flexed that, didn't you?
And I did. I was quoting the one line out of that book constantly. But it's so true, right? It's so easy when everybody else is playing a wait and see. It's so easy to become the expert in these things. And
really makes employers have to smarten up too, to keep the talent. That's one of the core reasons why one of the guys that I hired loves the role. He worked for NMAX, and they didn't allow him to innovate. And then there was another division or another company he went to. He had all these ideas, and they wouldn't let him innovate. They said, when we get there. And I've literally, my whole job as a manager is just to kick down the roadblocks and just let him work, and he's loved it.
Yep.
And these two guys have really changed my view on the working world, the next progression as employers, like what we need to do, and it's definitely made us level up. So I appreciate it.
And I think it's a challenge once companies figure out that they've got works and they start turning the crank, and it's, oh my gosh, we're actually making money finally. There's this hesitancy to change things, right? So you get protective. This is my one-line answer to somebody who asked me, why did RIM or BlackBerry fail? Is they built a company around an innovation. They didn't build an innovative company. Because you have to shift, right? You shift your focus from innovating to scaling or to a global reach. You have all these other things on your radar, and you have to find the time to carve out time and effort and award the innovation side of it too, right? And that can be challenging, right? Especially if you're still just a small business and you're finally paying the bills. I get why you don't want change, and some young kid comes along and says you're doing it all wrong. We should be adopting AI agents left and right. And so but this is the way the system's designed, right? It just gives opportunity. If that wasn't true, we would never have a startup beat an incumbent. So the fact that this happens over and over again, I don't know when Apple's going to start to go down. They will. Yeah. It happens to everybody. Yeah. Microsoft in the tech space is probably the longest running success story. Like Intel, the company that we sold to, like they're a blip now. They missed the boat on so many things. So if you're doing a startup or part of a startup, don't get intimidated by the size of your competitors. It's likely what's holding them back is that size and just their safety and risk aversions.
Again, as a seasoned leader, what professional skills are you currently focused on improving yourself?
Myself?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. So so what am I consuming? That generally means what you're trying to improve on. Yeah, I'm trying to understand people a little more. They seem to be the best and worst of everything.
You'll need a bit more than one book.
Yeah. I just read a book called something about, I don't know, 20-year-olds, how to deal with the 16 to 25-year-olds, or how to motivate them, or something like that. It was an academic wrote it, so it was all evidence-based and everything like that, which I also, as a sidebar, never looked for that before in my life. Like I was more interested in the storytelling aspect of books. Now I look for the credibility behind it, because anybody can tell stories. Yeah. So I think I now will read something from Adam Grant. I don't know if Adam Grant.
Adam Grant is
because I know it's coming from a place of research and knowledge. He's not just spinning the tail. Yeah. But yeah, just this, like, how do you motivate? Because I mentioned it's sometimes hard to get young people to take a risk and see their future. And
do you remember the name of that book? Because that's relevant to quite a few people that.
Yeah, it's when I say read, Audible.
Big Walker.
What the heck is it called? 10 to 25.
10 to 25.
So that's the age group.
Okay.
And I'm looking for the subtitle, but I got bad coverage here. And it's like a lot of things. Some of the answers are obvious. The one that resonates, though, is for this age bracket, you have to hold the bar high, but make sure they know you're there to get them to that bar. So if you look at the polar opposites in education, you'll have your hard-ass professor, or you'll have your coddling professor, and both of those are bad. What you need is somebody who, and this replace professor with boss, somebody who's, this is the acceptable bar, but I'm here to help you get there. So I believe in you and I will get you there. Let's go after this together, as opposed to just holding this bar and forcing the jump and not giving them any love or attention or training or anything else, or lowering the bar. Okay. So we do see a lot of that. It's just like this, and I'm guilty of that sometimes too. I want to be everybody's friend. I don't want to be. So yeah, I think I've gone too easy on some students, and they probably did them a disservice, and they didn't achieve what they could have achieved. So that's just one, and they call it a mentor's mindset or something like that, which is useful. I believe I can only be good at a couple things, and I really want to be a good mentor, and I really want to be a good coach. And
what do you think makes a good mentor? Considering that you've mentored so many of the people that have been on this show, including myself.
Yes, thank you. And it's at least the way I work, I try to go into a mode where I'm listening. I'm really careful about the questions. One of the scariest things is when somebody plays back something I've said to them. And it's just always a reminder that when you're in a position of authority, power, whatever it is, respect, that your words matter. So I think I used to be more flippant, but just being very careful as to, thinking about what the best way to ask this question is, and not trying to, I subscribe to this model where there's times as a mentor that you can teach. So just clearly, somebody doesn't know something, I'm just going to tell you how this works. There are times where you can give them advice, but for the most part, you should be coaching them. Because if I give you advice, you didn't learn anything that you would be able to do it yourself the next time. So how do I get you to arrive at the right answer without giving you what I believe is the right answer? Some of that's humility too, right? So, some of the group, like the people in your cohort, your age group, they're mentors to me now. Like, these guys are so bright. So some humility at, I don't know the answers. One of my turnoffs is when people my age want to tell people what to do. And there's a good chance they don't know. And it's just, so just ask good questions. Think about the questions you're trying to ask. I'm fortunate that I can be highly empathetic in the moment and then not bring it home with me. Because there's times as a mentor, you're dealing with somebody's crises and stuff like that. And my wife used to work back in Ontario with homeless and stuff. And she couldn't do that for more than a few years because she brought it all home. And so she's empathetic to a fault. Like, it's her gift and her curse at the same time. Whereas I think I'm situationally empathetic, but then I get to walk away. But so yeah, I think you got to care. You never ask what's in it for you. I think that was one of my first introductions to Calgary when I got here. There was a group of people they'd only make an introduction if they knew what was in it for them.
Yeah.
There was, call them kind of a broker mentality.
Would you say that's changed?
It's changed.
Yeah.
So I think
servitude, is that the word? Level of servitude?
Yeah, and I don't even know what the root of it was, but there seemed to be a group of people that, and they're probably still out there, where the only value they provide is their network. So they would not open their network up because there's no value past that. And whereas I think networks are for sharing and you have to earn it. I'm not going to
open up my Rolodex and just cut you to the end of the board game here.
And it's one of my rules is if you ask me for an intro, I will always ask the person first. Yeah. Do you mind if I do this introduction? Because that's protecting your network.
Yeah.
And I think maybe with one exception, everybody's, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because they know you don't abuse it.
But that's a ticket. And why you have such a great network is because you respect every individual that's within.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think you do have to have something, like if your network's free, then you got to figure out how to add value in other ways.
Yeah.
And this is where, again, I'm so friggin' lucky to my day job is helping people now, which is amazing. And when I give advice to young people, especially if they come for career advice, and this is what I think a lot of quote unquote successful people might forget is you're giving advice to your 22-year-old self. You're not giving your advice to the person who's now financially stable and comfortable and right. The whole follow your dream shtick is generally said by people who are already successful. It's a tough, first of all, a lot of people don't even know what the dream is. So that's almost a curse to say, do what you're passionate about. I don't know what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think this city wouldn't operate if people were just doing what they're passionate about.
No, no, we've had that conversation quite a few times with people on this show. Just personally, I've found a little bit of aggravation in the social media lens of go after what you're passionate about. And it's to a point, and Zach Hartley actually said it very well. If your passion doesn't pay, you can't really be doing it.
No, it's called a hobby.
So stop doing it. But I really do want to change paths a bit because you and I are notorious for going down some good segues for hours when we have conversations. Okay. You've mentioned like giving advice, and you've obviously given me a lot of advice over the years because I think I graduated. I'm coming up. It's been a while now. It's been a while. So a lot of your life advice has also come from how to word this, come from a place where you have a very strong partnership with your wife. Yeah. And you've mentioned her several times. And obviously in business, we talk about the importance of picking your co-founder because it's a marriage. And I want to ask questions like, how important was it to you to have the partner that you had to take the risk that you did? Because there's a few times that you've given me advice about quitting a job, and there was some security to that because your partner said, we can do this together.
Yeah.
And then you also took this risk of moving across the country.
Yeah.
She also took a step back from her schooling for you. So what is the importance?
Oh man.
What has she done for you? Which it sounds like a lot.
It is everything. Like when you think of what I know, they say you spend more time with your co-founder than you do with your spouse, but that's for a period of time.
Yeah.
That's a season of your life, not your life. Yeah. I think just always knowing that I've been the major breadwinner, but I would never even think of pulling that card out. And she's been we have 2 adult sons that would die for her. I think they might get maimed for me, but I'm not sure they would die for me. We've had this, and it took effort, but we try to really work hard to make sure that we're both not down at the same time. So we both have had moments in our lives where there's things that are challenging personally, and it's the signal that the other person is I don't say needs to.
Yeah.
They know, okay, I have to be the strong one in this.
I'll take 90% and you can give the 10.
Yeah. And I think that's been our saving grace, is that we've been on these good off. First of all, most of all, it's been up.
Yeah.
But if one of us is down, the other one isn't competing for who's more down, which I think can happen. We make all big decisions together, and they're rarely contentious. We haven't morphed into the same person. We're still very different people, but we tend to have the same attitudes around money. I wouldn't be in this job as long as I was if my wife wanted more and more, So I think it's our secret sauce, and the fact that I mentioned to you earlier, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, which is the scariest number I've ever heard. We didn't really do much with that. We just had our family.
But you spent 40 years.
We spent 40 years, and I just think our first 5 were probably the most challenging, just finishing school and getting all going. But it's funny, even the good stuff can be the challenging stuff, right? Our first big windfall from my RIM days, that was enough we watched friends fall apart with that. Because now there's what do we do with this? And one wants to get frivolous and the other one wants to save. And so I think whether it's negative news or positive news, these are all trying to be on the same page, or at least having a conversation about what page you're on.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us would ever do anything that would hurt or make the other person uncomfortable. We're almost sacrificial in that way, which you have to be careful of a little bit. Because, I'm responsible for my own happiness. She's not responsible for my happiness.
Yeah.
But it's been, through good times, through bad times. I'm a rock. So I live my life in a very narrow band. I don't get too down. I don't get too excited.
You've used this analogy a few times in our life, yeah?
And it's our good friend Jen, who used to work for me for however many years that was. It would almost be comical, because once a year we would high five. That was my public display of excitement and affection with Jen. It was like the night of Launchpad, we would high five. And that's, if I have something to work on personally, it's to let myself enjoy the highs, knowing that my fear is always that means I'm going to experience the lows. I don't want to experience the lows. But, and my wife enjoys the highs much better than I do, but goes through the lows more than I do as well. So I don't know why it works. It usually doesn't when you start as young as we started, but it's been the secret sauce all along. Like you said earlier, no young people want to talk about BlackBerry anymore, but I think the biggest thing I have to teach people, it's not even, I can't teach it, but the biggest success we've had is 2 kids that are our best friends in a 40-year marriage. And we did some things that I lucked out and was financially successful at. I think that's, so that whole package feel about our life is pretty darn sweet. So so I wish that on everyone. I really do. And I don't take it lightly. I know it's a challenge. Who is it? Scott Galloway? I don't know if you read Scott Galloway. Who said it's the most important financial decision you'll ever make is who you partner with. And that's not why you should do it, but it's one of many reasons you should be careful about who you partner with.
Oh, man. It's the quickest way to make a billionaire a millionaire.
Yep.
But I appreciate those kind of, kind of the points that you wouldn't get in the classroom. And I think a lot of people that have met you get the curriculum, Ray, or I like to think that we now, after I've known you 12 to 14 years, crossed into that friend, Ray. And
thank you. Yeah, I agree. And that's been fun to watch you guys mature and have those relationships. But so one thing, just to pull it back to that I always tell young people is it's all about trade-offs. Just be conscious of the trade-off you're making. So it's okay to work your ass off for 10 years. Just understand what you're not doing
in the meantime.
In the meantime. And the trade-off I very consciously made when we found out I was going to be a dad and all the rest of it was I want to focus on school and then work. I wasn't working at the time. So school and family.
Yeah.
So I immediately stopped. I used to play volleyball and I used to play soccer. Stopped it. So I consciously, and if I die young, maybe it was a bad decision, but decided that I can't do it all at this moment in my life. So I am going to trade off my personal life effectively to make sure I still had time to have a successful career and a successful family.
It sounds like you traded off you grew up real quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying I think I made the right choice for me.
Yeah.
And I just think this concept of balance is a wonderful concept.
Yeah.
I just think it's really hard to do for every day or every week or every month. And so just understand, and I would never attempt there's some really big decisions people have to make around kids and around two working parents and all that kind of stuff. But it's just know what you're not doing and be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, then
reassess.
Rejig. Yeah. And my mom, who is a little Scottish woman who's super wise, super intelligent, is born at the wrong time, that kind of generation. And the phrase that's always in my head, even especially since she passed away actually, is enough is as good as a feast. And now the key there is what is enough, but that was her message. And that was, she raised with my dad, obviously, with five kids, 10 degrees, 10 university degrees. Neither of my parents went to school. So I think she always knew, okay, you guys are all going to have way more than we ever had, which we all do, but don't let it ruin what's important. So yeah, it's always good to have those little voices in the back of my head.
Do you take much time out of your schedule, or just maybe if you look at it as a calendar year, for reflection? Do you take a conscious effort of reflecting?
More than I used to. So I used to be there's only this tractor only goes forward.
All gas, no brake.
And I would say the first time I did it seriously was when we sold the company, my company, and while in Rome, because you're still spinning, I did a 40-slide PowerPoint, because that was my tool of choice at the time.
Your creative vessel.
On everything I did wrong and all the lessons that I'd learned. And that was cathartic. About 10 years ago, probably in your era, I wrote a blog once a week, and it was basically going through that PowerPoint. And it was just identifying lessons the mistake I made, and the lesson hopefully other people can learn from it. So since then, I've become a huge fan of it. I don't journal. I get inspired by I have a son who does that all the time, but I do reflect and step back. And I'm again, I got a great job, so I'm not running 1,000 miles an hour to do that. I'm also at the point in my career where you're trying to figure out what more can I add?
Yeah.
What more can I contribute? What do I need to learn? How do I keep this stuff interesting? But it's a new skill. And I now know that without reflection, it's really tough to learn. It just all happened at you, and the next stuff's just going to happen at you as well. And it's only and I got this from the true faculty at school, it's only when you reflect on something that you can actually draw out a lesson in that experience. Otherwise, it was just an experience. But I think it is, especially when things go really well or really poorly, I think that's when it's important. Usually when things go well and I reflect, I'm like, luck. Literally, luck that I had an MBA when RIM was looking for engineers with an MBA. And we lived in a small town and there wasn't a whole lot of them. And that set my career up. I think you make your own luck, but give more credit to luck than to yourself on those ones. So.
It must be just a Ray superpower, or guys named Ray, because that Derek quoted this: pain plus reflection equals progress. And it was Ray Dalio that said that.
Oh, really?
Nice. Yeah. So you mentioning the
Yeah.
progress coming from essentially taking time to reflect on the fact that what happened to you has some learnings from it. I really appreciate that stuff.
Yeah. I think this is why I think everybody should mentor people, because I will work harder to extract a lesson for other people's benefit than I will for my own. right?
Interesting.
So when I go through something, I find it easier to put this skin of maybe Alistair or Derek or Aislinn might go through something similar and just pull it out. I think I'm just fooling myself, like I'm doing it for myself, but it's just, I think it's sometimes easier to couch it that way. Yeah, and anybody who listens to this podcast is probably capable of mentoring. Everybody's capable of mentoring.
Yeah.
I have a call tomorrow morning with a kid in grade 6 who reached out to me.
Hell yeah. That is so cool. That is so cool.
We'll see how
that.
it goes.
But we're gonna actually end on this last question here. What's something that you'd tell your younger self? You talked about you're in this stage of your life talking to 20-year-old somethings. What would you tell you?
Yeah, I just did some reflection on, I've probably engaged with 1,000 young people over the last decade or so. And the things I drew out of those that maybe stand above others, at least the time that I meet them, is be curious. Don't accept status quo. Ask why does it have to be that way, and what if it can be different. Be ambitious, and I don't mean financial. I just mean what's your stake that you're going to change, you're going to make in this world, and work hard. I think if you have those three going for you, and they don't always come naturally, especially the work hard one. I find people who are really smart are the ones who don't want to work hard. It's the people who are right on the edge. They get perfect GPAs or whatever you call it because they work their butt off. I'll take one of those over somebody it comes naturally to. But those three qualities, I think I had them when I was young, and that set me up. But so just keep working hard, keep ambition to change the world, right? Like I don't mean that in a hokey way, right? Just what's my mark on the world now is going to be non-financial. My mark is going to be helping young people for the most part, and just be curious as to how I can do that better. So
I like that. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show personally. Like I said, I've known you now since 2012. 2012.
Yeah, 2012.
So the ripple effect that you making that decision to come here on just my own personal network has been huge. And like I've mentioned it on the podcast, I was intentionally going to school to become a restaurateur. And then I met you. And then I got into the pursuit of entrepreneurship. And then eventually I got introduced to some people, and it took me down this path that if you didn't introduce me to the startup founders, I wouldn't have taken. So I wouldn't have gone down to San Francisco. I wouldn't have had probably one of the most pivotal career choices of being mentored and following around Scott Gravel for those 4 years without your introduction as well. And so I just want to emphasize like what you're doing is so impactful. And I know people have told you this, but I just want to keep reiterating it. I know there will come a point that you retire, but I hope as many people as possible get to take your courses before that time comes. And so thank you so much for jumping on this podcast.
Oh, very kind of you. Thank you so much. This has been amazing.
So we've made it to the end. You know what to do. If you've gotten all the way here, I really appreciate you. Please share, help us get this message out there. It really does help, but let's get after it. We'll talk to you soon. I've tried to get other people outside of the group, but they book and then cancel.
Really?
Yeah. I'm hoping with a few more
I thought
episodes.
about it, but
yeah.